Hi everyone, my name is Terri and welcome to Friday Fact Day, where I get to tell you a little bit about my work in fitness, feminism, and philosophy. And today's fact is girl push-ups. This is a big one. Got my little friend here from the art department to help me out. So, what people consider a real push-up, a traditional push-up, a proper push-up, a man push-up, is in a position on the floor quite like this. However, there is, and this model won't hold it, so I got to hold my fingers in place. There is, of course, from the knees, squared hips. That's what's considered a girl push-up. Boy, do we have a lot to unpack with this one. I want to give you a little context about why push-ups are so common and why they've been around for so long and why people who work in physical activity really seem to love them so much. They're a classic for a reason. They do a lot of amazing stuff for your body, especially if you're working on building upper body strength. There's very little not involved in a push-up. It would be faster for me to list the muscles not used in a push-up than the ones that are used. Back, chest, and anything to do in the shoulder and arm area where they connect. All of that's involved. Even down the side of the rib cage here, there's a muscle on each side called the serratus anterior, and that's even involved in push-ups. And you probably didn't even know you had that until I just said it now. Aside from all the muscle stuff that a push-up can do for you, it's what I like to call a time-thrifty exercise, because instead of having to do exercises for each of those things individually, you get them all done in one exercise. It's really one-stop shopping for most of the muscles in your body. Now, that all being said, that doesn't mean everybody has to do a push-up. If for whatever reason, be that something medical, some kind of injury, whatever that may be, we can work those muscles in other ways. It is, again, that time thriftiness where you can do so much with one exercise. Okay, so why do we refer to the push-ups that are done from the knees and with a bent hip as girl push-ups, or sometimes woman push-ups, or I've even heard lady push-up? Those of you who've taken intro psych, you're going to recognize this little next bit. It is, of course, the standard nature versus nurture argument. And we know there are literally millions of women on this planet who can do a push-up from the full plank position with no bend in the knees or the hips. We also know, believe it or not, there are plenty of men who can't. The difference, of course, comes in with training or learning. How we raise kids today is changing very rapidly, and I think definitely for the better. But those of us who are already adults, even teenagers right now, were probably raised according to cisgender assumptions and norms. That is, that if you were assigned male at birth, you were raised to be a boy, and if you were assigned female at birth, you were raised to be a girl. Generally speaking, when somebody is raised as a boy and is entered into boy-like activities by their parents or their teachers at school or whatever, the expectation is that they will be able to do this particular activity in the boy way, and that girls will not. So what ends up happening is girls often are never taught the technique, and like any exercise, there is a technique to it. If you were raised as a boy, you were raised with expectations that you would be able to do certain acts of strength, that you would be able to create force against an object better than somebody who is being raised as a girl. And quite often when it came to girls' physical activity, anything that was strength training based was really discouraged. So for girls, we often just were not taught the techniques required to do a push-up correctly and safely. And I do want to reiterate, it is technique. Every exercise has a technique. Nobody's born knowing how to do a push-up. That's not a thing. It's just like saying you were born knowing how to tie your shoes. Boys generally were encouraged to develop that skill and other skills related to it. So developing strength, but also the balance that's required and other things. And in both cases, these are behaviors that are rewarded when they're done by the right gender or the right sex for the activity. In other words, boys will be rewarded for doing the strength training and the practice that's required to get really good at doing push-ups, and girls will be rewarded for avoiding that. And when I say reward, it's not just, of course, actual, literal, tangible rewards. It's praise for doing the right thing or a lack of harassment or bullying for doing the wrong thing. Those are part of the reward system here too. So for a girl wanting to do push-ups or really any kind of strength training or sometimes any kind of physical activity beyond, say, ballet and figure skating and gymnastics, which are very girl-coded, the idea would be floated around by someone, probably not your other fellow physical activity enthusiasts, but family, schoolmates, whomever, busybodies in the community. I grew up in a small town. I know about those. Oh boy. Somebody will be in your business telling you that you shouldn't do that because you're going to get big, ugly, manly muscles. And once again, I will link my video down below for bulk. I'm also going to actually link the video, I think, for bicycle face. It's one of my older ones, but this is really, I mean, ultimately, this is all a cousin of, or maybe a descendant of, bicycle face. The idea is you've got to look feminine and act in a feminine way at all times, or you will be ruined. So check that one out below for the full explanation. I also need to bring up here, and I don't bring this up nearly often enough on this channel, and I am going to start working this in a bit more, but there's a lot of ableism around this idea. There's people who to this day still really believe that every man can do a push-up and that every woman can't. And aside from the rampant sexism of that, there's a lot of ableism. So ableism is assuming that people are able-bodied and making assumptions about what disabled people can or can't do. So there's plenty of people on any part of the gender spectrum and the sex spectrum who can and can't do push-ups. And to assume that because somebody is identified as male, or maybe they were assigned male at birth, that they can, ignores the fact that there are plenty of men in this world who have disabilities that rule out a push-up. So yeah, let's not do that. Let's not do ableisms, eh? Like, let's just kind of don't assume. Part of the problem with that too, of course, is it's a trap, right? Anybody who is identified as a boy or a man and can't do a push-up suddenly has their own gender identity called into question. Their manliness is on the line here. And if you've got, say, a shoulder impingement, a frozen shoulder or something, or maybe you're recovering from a broken elbow, whatever the injury or the disability might be, that becomes a gender issue, even though it really shouldn't ever be. So the idea that boys can naturally do a push-up and girls naturally can't is, well, it's not natural. It's the way we are raised. And if girls are constantly discouraged and directed away from things that would encourage physical activity and gaining strength, and boys are continuously directed towards those things, well, we're going to see that play out in the result. Basically, the number one rule of exercise, and particularly when it comes to building strength and building muscle, is the SAID principle, the specific adaptation to imposed demand. So what you impose on the body, what demands you put on the body, will be how the body adapts. It's that simple. If you never let girls do the skills that lead to a full plank push-up, they will never develop the skills that lead to a full plank push-up. Another thing I want to point out about the language here is that it's always done in the sense that the girl version, the knees down, hips might be squared version, is inferior to the full plank man version of a push-up. Sexism 101, right? That is a problem we have with so many things in the English language in particular, that we automatically position the feminine version as inferior to the masculine version. And that's not necessarily true. And specifically from an education angle, I know Kinese people, you're out there and you're going to be like, oh no, the plank push-up's better, even if we don't gender it. But you can have all the scientific arguments you want. The fact of the matter is that if the person who is exercising, the client, the student, whomever, doesn't get to practice their way up to that advanced level, then they're never going to get any benefit. End of. I know the STEM people are going to have a meltdown when they hear that, but well, too bad. This is why I'm an educator, not a scientist. The long-term effect of all of this is that girls who do too much physical activity, too much strength training, too many push-ups, they're too good at the skill, get coded as being a bad girl or being bad at being feminine. They're not feminine enough. They're transgressing some gender norms there. And of course, the opposite being true for people who identify as male. You have to conform to these things to be good at your gender. And that's terrible. That really sets up half the population to lose out on a great exercise that does so much for our physical well-being. And it sets up the other half of the population to basically have to do this whether it's right for them or not, and whether they're interested or not. And that's not fair to anybody. Thanks for watching. Lift heavy, fight the patriarchy, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye.